Hello, and welcome to an overview of the MYOB Greentree Reports and Documents Library. In this video, I'm going to go through the basic concepts of what the Reports and Documents Library is, how it works, and some of the benefits you'll get from using it, as well as a bit of a detailed overview of it. So let's start. First of all, the Reports Library. What is it? It's the ability to create a library to store reports in one place, and thereby helping to reduce the need for paper printouts and hard copies. The reports can be version controlled and easily seen, so therefore reducing the need of what's the latest version, what's the latest copy. The library itself has its own or additional security, which means you can control who can see what reports, who can view them, who can change them, etc. So what are some of the key benefits of this reports library? Why would you use it? Everything's in one place. The documents are stored in the library, so there's no rerunning is required. You don't use unnecessary PC resource all the time. Also mean it's quicker to call up the reports and view them. Documents are secure. As I indicated earlier, it's got its own security. Notes and comments, really important for those end-of-month reports. People are making notes, adding comments. This can potentially save lots of email discussions going on about querying something on a report. All those notes and comments are kept the trail of, so you can see what's going on all the time. The drill around still exists, so I can call up the report and still drill around, as you're used to doing currently at the moment with your standard free reports. The reports library is available on the browser, and we'll take a look at that later on. Okay, that being said, let's take a look at how it all works. So how does it work? The setup is reasonably straightforward. Using Greentree's standard tree setup, you create your reports tree or folder structure. So here I am in the tree maintenance screen. I've given my tree a name, in this instance just called the reports library, and I've created my standard tree structure. This is in line with how you'd set up any other tree. A brief look on the security that I mentioned earlier. So there's a new screen called Library Security. I've called up my tree name here. This is my tree structure, and as you come down at various folder levels, you can see on the right hand side that it's got my users and whether I have the ability to view, add or delete at that user level within that folder. Standard security applies in that if you apply it at the highest level, it applies that security down through the chain. So it depends how complex that setup is. Okay, let's have a look at the reports library itself. Okay, so in the reports library, there's a bit of a different look and feel as to standard Greentree screens. First of all, we have a concept here. The bold items are unread reports, so you haven't looked at these yet. Whereas the unbold, this means that these have been viewed. This leads us on to, at the top here, where we've got this notification section. So any new reports that are run, and I'll come on to shortly how reports get into the reports library, these appear here in the notifications area, as well as the folder they've been to. As you can see by this, it's telling me I've got 9 unread. I recently viewed. This holds a history of all the ones that I've viewed. And so down into my report structure that I set up via the tree. Reports can be moved just like we move the elements around trees. So I can take, for example, in here, and I can just move reports to different folders as required, or if I change my reporting folders. I can search. Up here I can search for any reports. I have the concept of viewing the latest only or the unread only. These report headings here are fairly self-explanatory. These are my report names, when they were created, when they were last viewed, when they were updated, and the report date. Coming across here to some of the more detailed areas, what company it relates to. This sits across companies, as you can see from this example that I've highlighted here. So this is when the benefits that I highlighted earlier, I can now view this report. I click on that icon there. This opens a view of the report. As I indicated, this report is stored, so as you can see there was no running of that report. I can see a PDF version of this report. Fairly basic report in this instance, but the example of what it's doing is running it in PDF. I can also run it into Excel. I've got some notes, and I've got the origin of the report. In this instance, financial report, standard report. So here again, the reports library is demonstrating that I'm mixing up different types of reports coming from Greentree. Let's just have a look at these notes. Go into these notes. As you can see, these are notes that are commented on this report. The green here is the comments that have been made on these notes. Okay, these ones are fairly generic and fairly basic in what they're trying to show you. You can see they're time-stamped, and also there's an indication here, not budgeted, why not? Spoke to the marketing manager. This is the green indicates it's a comment. Can you please send me a copy of the email, please? So again, this conversation or these comments are happening within this report, within the report library itself. I can add more notes, or on the notes itself, I can then add a comment as well. All these actions are trapped all the way through to see what's going on, and there's my permissions about who can do these things. So how do reports get into the reports library? I've got a nice example here of lots of information in, but how do they get in there? Essentially, there's 3 ways that they can get in here. If I'm working on my 2017 reports for August, although I could sit anywhere, if I right-click on this, I can add a new report, or I can add multiple reports. So by clicking on the Add Report, it simply tells me what report do I want to choose. Add multiple reports. It's then saying to me, okay, what reports do you want to add into this? So they might be reports that I've already run, or that somebody else has run for me, and I'm now connecting or putting those reports into my report library. My WebView GL reports can be placed in here. Reports, General Ledger, my financial reporting. I'm going to run my balance sheet for this period. I'm going to run this report. This is all standard as it currently is. Save the published report, and in here now you'll see here's the folder. So this is now saying which folder, and as you can see these here, these folders are my reports library, and it's saying where do you want to put these. That will then file that report into my reports library accordingly. Okay, as you can see here, I've got a customer balances report, my inventory report, my job costing job summary, my supplier balances, my fixed assets depreciation schedule. So good examples of my monthly financial reports that I'm running and putting in this library. Not having printed copies anywhere, saved on the network, etc. So how do these reports get in here? So this is the third way of how reports can get into the report library. Let's just run my supplier balances. I've run my supplier balances report. Now up here alongside the save, you'll notice there's now this option, save the PDF into the report library. Save it into the report library. Again, the same option opens that we just saw previously with the financial report. It's saying, which folder do I want to place it in? Again, those folders mirror that report library. Okay, so far we've talked about the reports library and a brief overview of what it looks like. So now I'd like to talk about the documents library. But first of all, what's the difference between the documents library and the reports library? So the documents library is similar to the reports library, but it's aimed more as a repository for storing commonly used documents, with then the ability to share them. Okay, so what does that mean? Let's have a look at some examples. Okay, so the setup of the documents library is the same as the reports library. In other words, it's a tree. The difference is you can have more than one documents library, which you'll see in a second. But then in this example, I've got a tree called internal documents, and I've set up the structure as such. When I then come into the documents library, it looks pretty similar to the reports library, but there's a few differences. In the document library, I get to choose which library I'm picking from or looking at. So in other words, that internal documents one. Here's my setup here. Again, I've got the same principle of notifications, my recently viewed, but I've broken these up. These are my business templates for my general, HR, marketing, health and safety, etc. Let's just look at one here, human resources. So again, it's fairly self-explanatory as to what's happened here. There's been some standard, in this example, Word templates put in here when they were created, last viewed, and therefore they can be taken from here. How do they get here? Again, the same thing, because they're not Greentree reports, I can run them from here. I can pick up these reports, add a new report, or add multiple reports, the same as I did with the reports library. I've got search in here. I've also got other filters, that my status. So statuses are just defined in terms of how I might like to have these documents. They're just drafts, final version, waiting approval. And what type they are. You can set these types up as part of your setup for the library functionality. And again, I've got the latest and unread only, so I can switch between them. Again, there's my marketing, where I've got those templates in there. So this could hold all my reports that I'm using, price lists, etc. So how do they get in here? I've shown them how they can be added that way, but then how can they be shared? I'm just going to jump into my customer here. In my standard attachments, you now see some extra options here. I can add from the library. So in other words, I've got an example of a new price list that I'm adding to the customer master file. If I click add from library, it jumps into my documents library and say which file do you want to use. This one here, here's one I prepared earlier. View in the document library. So I click on that and it takes me into the library itself. So that's a way that those documents that are in the library can be shared on the customer. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to cover off on this overview of the Reports and Documents library is the access to both those libraries through the browser. So here I've logged into my browser client, and now I have two badges here, my Reports badge and my Library badge. Go into my Reports badge. You may recall that these folders are mirroring what I saw in the Windows client. So this is my Reports folder. So there I was, you may recall, I was looking at August. Here's my August. I've got two unread. Come into here. These are my reports. The red dots indicating the unread ones. I can search my reports as I could in Windows, and I can have a look at the unread ones only. The functions here are that you download that report. So if I wanted to look at that supplier balances, I'm downloading it. Again, remembering that in this reports library, those reports are always stored in that library. So all I'm doing here is downloading just a local version of that report so I can look at it. The badge for the library is the Documents library. So again, if I go to look in this, I've got this drop down to switch between my different libraries, my different document libraries I should say. Go into that internal documents one, which was the one I looked at earlier, and into my HR, and there's those two that are sitting there. Again, I have the option to download those if I want to view them. I'd like to thank you for your time today, for watching this video, and hope you have found it of some use. Thanks again.